Okay, so I have four big stories today. It is Wednesday, April 9th, 2025. We're going to start with China and that thing with Chinese soldiers in Ukraine, and then we'll go to see what's going on with Russia, and then we'll go and see what's going on with the European Union. And then after that, we'll go and see the American havoc from trade and tariffs and how that is affecting around the world, which will bring us back to China and then to the American political whatever mess that we're in. Okay, so this is where we are. Let's start here with China. China was aware, this is in the Kyiv Post, China was aware of its citizens' participation in the war against Ukraine on the side of Russia, Zelensky said during a meeting with journalists. Quote, "We have documented that they knew about it. We have documented that these are Chinese citizens and they are fighting against us using weapons against Ukrainians on the territory of Ukraine. Their motivation, whether it is money, politics, or something else, is still unclear to me, but we will find out." Okay, so the real question was how organized are these guys? What are they doing there? That sort of thing. So, okay, next story. So let's look at this. China denies claims that Chinese soldiers are fighting alongside Russia against Ukraine. So I think what they're saying is this isn't like Chinese regiments or something like that, but there could be Chinese individuals there fighting with Russia. Okay, according to the spokesperson of China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Beijing has always urged citizens to stay away from the conflict zone in Ukraine. That doesn't mean there aren't Chinese nationals, but okay. Here, Tammy Bruce was having none of it yesterday about China. There's a very hawkish stance from the United States, a hawkish posture toward China. China is a major enabler of Russia in the war. China provides nearly 80% of dual-use items in the war. The United States is aware that Ukraine captured 2 Chinese soldiers. She confirmed the attack on Kryvyi Rih was by means of Russian ballistic missiles. And she also talked about how President Trump's committed to finding the return of stolen Ukrainian children.
The U.S.-Ukraine dialogue negotiations this week in Washington. Any color you can offer? Who's going to be involved? Will they be in this building as well?
I can't speak to any conversation or discussion about Russia-Ukraine here.
Thank you. On Chinese involvement in Ukraine-Russia war, President Zelensky today posted a video suggesting that they captured 2 of Chinese nationals fighting in Ukraine on behalf of Russia. Does the Secretary have any comment on that? And does it change your view, your position on how to help Ukraine, beef up Ukraine's hands?
Yeah.
Now that we know they're fighting against not one.
It's disturbing. It's disturbing with North Korea participating. It's disturbing with the Chinese soldiers having been captured. We're aware of those reports that Ukraine captured 2 Chinese citizens fighting on behalf of Russia in Ukraine. China is a major enabler of Russia in the war in Ukraine. China provides nearly 80% of the dual-use items.
Okay, and she's starting to go into that list that I was just going over here, so we're not going to have to listen to that. But yeah, they have a hawkish stance toward China, and even if China is supporting Russia. So there's something there. Yesterday I was talking about with the Chinese soldiers in Ukraine. Don't flip out. We don't know how many there are. Just try to, here's what we know at this point. I don't think it's like the North Korean scenario, but we just don't know what we don't know yet. Okay, let's go to big story number 2. Russian paper says Donald Trump is conducting affairs chaotically. This is in the Russian papers. This is what's being said about Trump in Russian papers. Listen to this because it gives you a different perspective of what's going on in the world. And some of this is regarding the peace talks with Ukraine, and some of this is just his chaos. The first part is just his chaos.
Today's Russian papers do not make happy reading for America's president. Komsomolets declares Trump's vulnerability is now clear and Russia should draw its conclusions in time. And the vulnerability? Well, according to the paper, Donald Trump is his own worst enemy. The US president is trying to do too much on too many political fronts at the same time. He could end up being, in the words of the proverb, jack of all trades and master of none. As well as trying to end the war in Ukraine, Donald Trump has announced talks with Tehran and has warned it'll be a very bad day for Iran if they fail. I haven't enough fingers and toes to count the political crusades the US president has launched simultaneously. Trump is crashing the global financial markets with his shock tariffs, while continuing the rout of his own government and administrative structures with the help of Musk. Trump is destroying everything around him, not for the sake of it, but out of an intuitive calculation. His aim is to trip up and disorient his opponent, make them panic and prevent resistance. But the writer has this warning for overambitious politicians trying to solve several monumental tasks at the same time. By trying to deal with everything, and in such an abrupt way, Trump and his administration inevitably just skim the surface. Pieces of complex jigsaw puzzles are thrown into the air in the hope that when they come back down again, they'll somehow form a new, more sensible picture. Probably some of them will. Trump tends to get lucky, but not all of them will.
Okay, so that is Russia's assessment of what is going on, the chaos in the Trump administration. A YouTuber that you know texted me today and said, Trump is playing with fire. And my reply was, which issue? There are like a dozen of them. And that was my assessment. And that happens to be the assessment that I heard later when I came across this from reading Russia. Just a little bit more about this, because this now lends itself to the peace talks.
And when the US president's 100-day honeymoon is over, these jigsaw puzzles that were tossed in the air will painfully land on the heads of members of his administration. Conducting affairs chaotically and a desire to achieve everything at once, it's this that clearly makes Trump vulnerable. And the pain will soon begin. What kind of pain? We don't know yet.
He doesn't know yet. Nobody knows yet. But we're like, they say, never rip up a fence until you know why it was there. Well, he's ripping up fences, and it seems like he doesn't understand that there might have been a reason for the particular fence.
It will certainly have a major influence on US-Russia relations.
Listen to that again.
We don't know yet, but it will certainly have a major influence on US-Russia relations. And probably this moment is not far off. What does look far off is the Trump administration succeeding in driving a wedge between Russia and China.
Yeah, and I don't see that happening, although theoretically maybe they could do that by splitting the Trump administration off from the Trump administration, the Putin, splitting Putin off from China, the Trump administration trying to do that. I don't know that they're actually trying to do that or want to do that or whatever, but I just don't see that. Okay. Russia this year, according to expert calculations, will spend more on military needs than the entire European Union. What? Yeah, well, it depends on how you calculate it. So there is an economist that's looking at it, and economists look at things in different lights, right? So this is a quote, and here's the economist talking here. As a percentage today, Russia spends somewhere around 9% of its total gross product on defense. The European Union is approaching 2%. NATO will probably achieve somewhere around 3%. The United States spends around 3.5%. If we move to nominal value, that's actual currency, like the same currency amounts, right? The European Union spends about $340 billion. The United States about $900 billion. Russia spends around $140 billion, I think, somewhere around that. But if you look at purchasing power, what it is relative to the currency in that country and how much you can actually buy for the amount in that country, if we're switching to purchasing power parity, it turns out that Russia this year, according to this expert calculation, will spend more on military needs than the entire European Union. I mean, based on their currency and how much they can purchase X number of weapons or X number of bullets or whatever for whatever the amount is relative to their currency. So, yeah, that's kind of a sobering thought that's now. Take it with a grain of salt, because purchasing power is not the same as whatever, but it does show that, like, the coalition of I don't know what you want to call it. I don't want to call names, but the coalition of the wilting, the witless, the wavering. I just, like, Europe has to stand up. Now, when Europe does stand up, it can be a behemoth, but it has to be willing to do that. And I'm not trying to call names at Europe. Today, let's turn our attention to Europe. Today, the EU approves countermeasures against Trump. The measure will target $23 billion of U.S. goods, including motorcycles, poultry, fruits, wood, and clothing. Now, this is a reaction to the tariffs from the Trump administration. Then we see this happening now. Key GOP Congressman Mike Rogers warns against the Pentagon that their plans to reportedly cut thousands of troops from Europe. Congress has not been consulted, he says. Putin is not our friend. So this is Mike Rogers, and he's a fairly important committeeman, chair of a committee. Let's hear what he has to say.
Vladimir Putin is not our friend. He is an unreformed KGB agent who believes the collapse of the Soviet Union was, quote, the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the century, close quote. His desire to reconstitute the Soviet Union drove him to attack Georgia in 2008, invade Crimea and the Donbass in 2014, and then launch a full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Those that blame NATO enlargement or suggest that Russia was somehow provoked into attacking Ukraine are wrong. The Ukrainian people have fought bravely over 3 years to defend their freedom. But I agree with President Trump, it is time to stop the bloodshed. President Biden never had a plan to end the war. By slow-rolling weapon deliveries and imposing loophole-ridden sanctions, he allowed the conflict to grind to a stalemate. President Trump has broken that deadlock. Ukraine has agreed to a ceasefire as a first step, showing their desire for peace. Russia, however, has refused to do the same and continues to slaughter innocent victims. Just last week, Russia bombed a playground, killing 9 children. Murdering innocent Ukrainian children does not advance peace. President Trump was right to warn Putin that if he doesn't start negotiating in good faith, then the U.S. will ratchet up pressure and impose unprecedented sanctions. Because, as President Trump knows, Putin only respects strength, and he has acted accordingly. He sanctioned the Nord Stream 2. He withdrew from the INF Treaty after Russian violations. He sent additional U.S. troops to Poland, and he armed Ukraine with anti-tank missiles, not blankets.
He being Trump.
That's why Putin didn't invade Ukraine during President Trump's first term.
Okay, and that's a standard Republican line, and this is a Republican talking, but it's pretty good so far for a Republican.
And that's also why Putin must prove he's serious about peace, and soon. We cannot allow Russia to drag out these negotiations. Now, while I agree that China is our pacing threat,
Okay, so we'll stop there with that. I just wanted you to hear that. Okay, now back to the EU. EU Foreign Affairs Council will discuss updated callous plan on April 14th, aiming to boost military aid to Ukraine, including $5 billion in ammunition. That's half the EU states have backed the plan. We don't know exactly what's going to happen with that, whether it's going to play out like we would hope, but okay. Now, Russia, on the other hand, is facing a potential budget crisis as the price of oil plummets as fear of trade wars. So the instability has created kind of a bad scene, and we'll see how that plays out. But it'll take a long time of economic pain before it's going to do something to the Russians. So don't hope in that. Now, Rand Paul, a Republican senator from Kentucky, said this about we have to start telling the truth, because we're now shifting into the talk about tariffs here. Tell the truth about tariffs. Listen to what he has to say. It's insightful.
We have to start from talking about the truth. One of the things they say with Canada is, oh, there's a 270% tariff on dairy products going from the U.S. into Canada. Well, you know what the real tariff is? 0. That's a big difference between what the truth is. So there's a certain amount of goods, dairy goods, that go to Canada every year, and they go at 0%. If we exceed a certain amount, there's this ridiculous 270% tariff, but we've never encountered it, and the USMC renegotiated it and raised the level that's under 0. Trump should be congratulated for USMC raising the amount of dairy that goes in at 0, but we have to have an honest debate. We can't go around saying that there's a 270% tariff when that's not really the truth.
Yeah, so we have to be careful with what we're saying. When we say we have reciprocal tariffs and we don't have reciprocal tariffs, we have some kind of weird formula for saying that they're ripping us off, and you're going to see that in just a moment. So what's happened in the meantime? Canada has imposed retaliatory tariffs on the U.S. cars and auto parts at 25%. So even your U.S. cars are going to be more expensive if this happens. China announces it will take countermeasures with U.S. tariffs set at 104%. Here is Australia talking about how there are no tariffs on the United States. In fact, the United States has a trade surplus with Australia. So rather than slap 10% as a minimum on Australia, Australia should be doing that to us based on the same logic of what's going on here because they have a trade surplus. Okay. Chinese embassy. China will raise tariffs for all imported U.S. goods from 34 to 84% on April 10th, they have announced. And then we see this, Trump about the Chinese. They've ripped us off left and right, but now it's our turn to do the ripping. Let's just hear just 10 seconds, 20 seconds.
Right now, China's paying a 104% tariff. Think of it, 104%. Now, it sounds ridiculous, but they charged us for many items 100%, 125%. Many countries have. They've ripped us off left and right. But now it's our turn to do the ripping. Right
okay, so first, why? I mean, we don't need to do that. We could work the other direction, work down rather than up. But that's his position, or his disposition is going to be to, we're going to stick it to you. It's not going to be good for the world. Okay, now, then we see this. This is a Truth Social post. Based on the lack of respect that China has shown to the world's markets, I'm hereby raising the tariff charge to China by the United States of America to 125%. Why is that? Well, because China was announcing they're moving up to 84%. I think that's a sequence. Effective immediately. At some point, hopefully in the near future, China will realize that the days of ripping off the USA and other countries is no longer sustainable or acceptable. Now, all this is just creating havoc around the world, and that kind of helps Putin mostly. Now, the oil prices isn't helping him, but I like the focus elsewhere other than Ukraine is helping Putin. Conversely, and based on the fact that more than 75 countries have called representatives of the United States, including Departments of Commerce, Treasury, and USTR, to negotiate a solution to the subjects being discussed relative to trade barriers, tariffs, currency manipulation, and non-monetary tariffs, and that these countries have not, at my strong suggestion, retaliated in any way, shape, or form against the United States, I've authorized a 90-day pause and a substantially lowered reciprocal tariff during this period of 10%, also effective immediately. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So we're raising the tariff, but we're also going to pause the tariff simultaneously. And that was just very, very weird. This is the president's press secretary talking about the same thing. This was the president's press secretary over here and the Treasury secretary talking about, like, his press spokesperson was saying, many of you in the media clearly missed the art of the deal and don't understand what he's doing. What he's doing here is, now all these other countries are calling him, waiting, wanting to make a deal, trying to kick the door down to make a deal. Okay, this was a few hours also after the European Union increased its tariffs on these goods. I'm not sure that the EU was what had the effect, but okay, I mean, there could be something there. Trump said that he's applying a 90-day pause on new tariffs. At the same time, he announced that he was raising a tariff rate on China to 125%, ratcheting up his tit for tat with China. It was kind of a bizarre message to see. Darth Putin, the parody site, talked about how, thank you for your attention to this pump and dump scheme, because the markets, the 90-day pause, right? The markets went wild with that. This is trading average for the S&P 500. It's like the top 500 companies, and look at what happened. It went from 4,965 to 5,472 in a day on the announcement of a pause. Okay. Now, if you look at the last 5 days, it was terrible, 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 terrible. And then boom, that went way up because he's announcing a pause. So these tariffs are not well received by the market. Some jokester was putting this out with 125% tariffs on Chinese-made goods. Those could become unaffordable. These Make America Great Again hats that are made in China. And some people will point out the irony. It's Make America Great and it's made in China. I think it's great that we're importing and exporting to China and saving that money and using it, being more productive on other things. That's the way the world should be working. We should be freely trading. And anyway, Jake Bro posted this. The modern Republican Party has died in 2018 with the passing of John McCain. I hear that all the time. As a Republican myself, I'm not convinced that that's the case. But he also posted this below that. Reagan believed in NATO. Absolutely true. Reagan believed, and let me go back to this. I'm not picking a fight here with Jake. He sees things differently than I see things, and that's perfectly fair. But there's a good minority, a sizable minority of people like me that are like, what are you doing? Why are we talking about tariffs and how Russia's the good guy? What are you guys talking about? Like, when did Russia become the good guy? Well, and it's usually not that Russia's the good guy so much as that's not our fight over there. That's the way that they tend to think about it. And when did we become pro-tariff people? We were always the free trade crowd. Okay, at any rate, let's go back here. Reagan believed in NATO. True. Reagan believed in foreign assistance. True. Reagan opposed tariffs. True. Reagan opposed Russian aggression. True. Yeah, I'm tired of people saying, like, I've heard folks from the MAGA side call me a rhino, which means a Republican in name only, because I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid about the party line, the MAGA party line about Russia or tariffs or that sort of thing. No, I'm still the conservative. The only thing I have as a problem with this meme here, modern conservatism, where Reagan is a commie and Putin is the hero, is this isn't modern conservatism. This is modern republicanism under MAGA. But conservatives, we're still in the same place that we were before, and that's not the same as the populist MAGA crowd. So just for clarification. Somebody posted this. Hey, Suri, what happened in the election cycle after a Republican president and Republican Congress pushed massive tariff bill that drove our economy off a cliff? So this was the election of 1932. They're not making it up. Just Google it and you'll see in Wikipedia a chart that looks just like this. The Republicans got hammered, and that's what's about to happen in a year and a half at the midterm elections, because people just do not appreciate this instability right now. Somebody posted this. Remember Signalgate? One of Trump's superpowers is being involved in so many scandals all the time that very few of them end up having staying power beyond a news cycle or two. And that seems to be what's happening. Okay. Let's close this out. On this day in 1989, Russian troops massacred 21 pro-democracy protesters in Tbilisi. 17 were young women killed with poison gas and blunt force. 4,000 others were injured. 2 years later, Georgia broke free from Moscow's grip, but Russia never stopped. They returned with war in 1992, again in 2008. Then came a quieter invasion of Georgia's government itself. That's the battle that the Georgians are fighting today. They just keep coming. They don't give up. It's not like this is just going to go away. It just won't. I mean, that's not the reality. Okay, last little bit. The purpose of propaganda, says Darth Putin, is not to make you believe something. It's to make you believe nothing. Then you'll do nothing. All right, my friends, that's all that I have for you today. Thank you for staying with me this long. I'm sorry it went this long. Thank you for the time, the likes, the shares, the subscribes, the coffees. Thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.